Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the November 21st, 2013 Economic Development Committee meeting. We're going to be getting final report by our consultant, Peter Quass, regarding his research of the market and whatnot, and his recommendations to the town of Newmarket. So without further ado, I will let Peter begin his presentation.
Thanks, Gary, and thanks, everybody. Appreciate you all being here. So what I'm going to try to do is, if we can, in the interest of time and keeping things moving, to go through the presentation and save the discussion for the end of the presentation. But if you do have some questions, clarifications, or something you don't understand in the presentation, please speak up and I'll try to answer your questions. And as we go through the recommendations, please think about how your reaction to the recommendations, because I'd like to discuss, do you agree with the recommendations? Do you see some changes that need to be made? Do you, are there something missing? Finally, also, these are really an outline of recommendations because I wanted to lay out the basics of the recommendations and then get your feedback, make any refinements necessary, and then we can think more about a little bit more detail in terms of what would be done, sort of an implementation plan, who would take the lead in implementing some of these recommendations. And so can you, as we're going through it, if you think about who are the right actors to play a role in this. Just tried to briefly distill what I see as the goals of economic development for the community, summarize the key conclusions from the analysis, which provide the basis for the recommendations. In response to some of the comments last time, really tried to take a very close look at the B and the M districts and get a better feel for where the development opportunities were and weren't, and then go through the outline of recommendations. These are what I perceive to be the goals of the project. Clearly, folks are interested in expanding the property tax base through more commercial development, but also increasing the quantity, variety of local goods and services that are available to purchase in the town, to grow markets so that businesses can be more profitable and successful, to ensure adequate commercial space, because if you want to develop business, there's actually not a lot of empty commercial space in the community. So development, commercial development, and business development really go hand in hand. And placing all that in the framework of preserving what you like about the town. It's rural, small town character, the quality of life you feel you have here. Okay, key conclusions. First of all, just to recap our earlier discussions of where the growth opportunities are in the local and regional economy, and also some of the things we see, some of the kinds of businesses that folks want to see here that seem to have a realistic opportunity of developing. One thing I added here, most of these I think you've seen before, but I was very interested in looking at compiling lists and looking at the different kinds of businesses in the community. This whole little nexus of people who make craft products. And I've left my notes in my office, but things like custom bicycles, custom home furnishings, a number of other things like jewelry. A lot of these businesses, but not all, are in the mill. But I think it's interesting that that maybe it's not, you're not likely to get a big manufacturing plant, but a trend in manufacturing is building these smaller scale craft, custom-made products. And we see something of that happening here, which I think is interesting. I think some people think of economic development as you're going to get one or two big projects, you're out there prospecting for a big company to come in. I think in Newmarket, that's not likely to happen, but development is much more likely to be incremental and to take place over time. Most of your sites are small, so you're not going to get large development. We'll talk about some of the limitations to what are the larger sites in the community. The businesses in the industries that we think have growth potential are generally small. And again, the big sites, the large parcels of land have a lot of issues that are going to make development problematic. And to grow businesses, you've got to grow your commercial property base because my understanding is there's really not a lot of empty space, commercial space, for businesses to come into. So they go hand. Now, I just wanted to point out, because I did a little analysis, and if your goal is to reduce or increase the tax base so you take the burden off of residential property taxes, you really would have to do a lot of commercial development. I estimated you'd have to, this is a little dated by 1 or 2 years, but your valuation of commercial properties was about $46 million in 2011 or 2012. It was 125.7 million. So you would actually, just to get your tax rate down by $1, you'd have to increase your commercial property assessed values by about over a third. So that would be a formidable development agenda. So one of the things you kind of have to balance, like, is this such a strong goal that you really want to very aggressively pursue commercial development, or does that sound like, a little much for the community?
Not a lot of return.
Do you have
Yeah, not a lot of return, yeah.
do you have any sense of how much buildings, how big of a site that would require to get 46 million? Is that,
Well,
is there an
and how to
example?
assess values
Depends on-
compared to market values. We're talking about adding 46 million, say 50 million of assessed value to your property tax base.
Could be anything.
That's a significant amount of development.
Yeah, that's,
If you look at like one of the buildings, I think one of the medical buildings is assessed, just round number, a little over $1 million. So if you're talking about, a fairly significant development in Newmarket now, I don't know how many square feet it is, but
46 of those.
you're talking about, 40 plus.
Liberty Healthcare is 2.8 million.
So we're talking, and that's to reduce your tax rate by $1.
So how much do we spend then in order to get?
Well,
$1
that
back? I mean,
factors
then
in.
it gets worse.
That factors
better.
in how much, at least, I don't know exactly how much you spend per dollar per dollar of revenue on commercial property, but in my little footnote, the average from studies that are done of cost of community services says you spend 26 cents for commercial properties for every dollar in value that increases. But I factored that into my equation.
One quick question, does that
Yeah.
include, when you say 26 cents for cost, does that include like traffic issues and/or, upgrading roads and stuff like that, or is that in that number?
I think it's a total, they tried to come up with a total number, so any cost of municipal services related to development would be included in that.
You can't
I
really
can check that, but I
You
think
can't really
it's,
put a price on traffic though, can you?
you mean traffic congestion?
Yeah.
No, that would just be actual, out-of-pocket costs,
Okay.
not costs like to people in the,
Okay.
because of more congestion.
Thank you.
So, if your goal is to reduce your tax rate, you're going to have to be pretty aggressive about doing more commercial development. So that's a question for the community to decide.
And that would just be, just to put it in perspective, the mill redevelopment is a $20 million project, the Main Street mill redevelopment.
So it's almost 3 more mills.
But that is not all commercial. So to kind of put that
Okay.
in perspective.
Okay.
And just as an aside, I don't have it in the presentation, but I did a little analysis of what the tax rates are in the surrounding communities. And first of all, Newmarket is not that bad. I mean, it's higher than some, but lower than others. But the factor that seems to make the biggest difference is the value of residential property. So communities that have very high value residential properties are the ones that have the lowest tax rates. There's some exceptions to that. I think Portsmouth has a low tax rate because it has a really strong, does really have a very big commercial tax base. But in any case, so that's something to take into consideration. Just having tried to get to know the community, what the opportunities are, it's my feeling that downtown development really offers the greatest opportunities for the town. You've got some momentum in the Newmarket Mills, in the Bryant Rock condos, and people are looking at the town in a different way. There are, some attractive features to the downtown. There are some smaller sites available for development in and near the downtown. We'll look at some of those. Potential to convert some properties from residential to commercial use that are in the B zones. The downtown, it's a good match with when we look at the business opportunities, where the growth opportunities are, the kinds of properties that they would reside in, and the fit with being in the downtown or near the downtown. And then just by focusing on the downtown and trying to make it more of an asset than it already is can help you to attract more businesses. And this is my little diagram here, and the point here is, like, you can start at any point and you can go in any direction. That there's these three mutually reinforcing elements that can catalyze downtown's further development, and that's commercial and mixed-use property development, new businesses, and more residents and visitors. And they all mutually reinforce each other, so that a strategy to develop commercial activity and commercial property in the downtown really has to think about addressing each of those three elements, and we'll talk about that more in the recommendations. Now here's probably the most
This was the most confusing one.
contentious point, and maybe confusing, but the question of how do you balance things? And if you want to have, to me, like a successful small town downtown, when you look at some of the ones that you really like, you have some height. You have 2 or 3 story buildings. And in your zoning, you have allowances, depending on what zone, for 3 to 5 floors, roughly, of height. But if you're thinking about office or some kind of retail or commercial activity on the first floor, it's probably unlikely you're going to get a lot of commercial activity on the upper floors, which leaves you with residential. As I read the zoning regulations, the restriction of density restriction of 6 units per acre would make developing 2 or 3 or 4 story buildings problematic from a design standpoint and a financial standpoint. So I don't know if this was hard to understand, but basically I have an acre lot here and a half-acre lot. And what I was trying to show is, under the zoning regulations that you have today in both the M2 and the M2A, given setback requirements and parking requirements, on an acre lot, you'd have a 15,750 square foot floor plate. That would be the maximum floor plate that would be allowable under the zoning. If the developer takes advantage of the maximum size or floor plate of the building he can develop, and you think about 6 units per acre as being the density restriction, 6 units, because take a condominium unit, which you allow up to 1,200 square feet, and you take into account common area, that would be about less than 8,000 square feet of space. So you have you have almost 16,000 square feet of space on the first floor, but you have 8,000 square feet of space on the floor, on the second floor, because that's all you can build under the regulations.
Oh, I gotcha. Okay.
And the half-acre lot, it's pretty much the same thing. You could build 3 units on that second floor. So there's a decision, mathematics is always a challenge, but I think I've got it right. There's a decision that you folks have to make about, do we want to keep these densities this low with the understanding that it's going to be very difficult to get buildings with upper stories, or do we want to create some flexibility? And what I suggested in the recommendations is perhaps you could say, give a density bonus for developers who promise to, or who adhere to more rigorous design standards. Because I think another element here is, and we'll get into a little bit more, but in building on your downtown, you want to have quality properties that are consistent and compatible and fit in with your, the architecture and historic character of the downtown. And so you don't want to have somebody come in and put up a, garden variety, very, conventional, uninteresting building that doesn't really add to the, the visual appeal of the downtown.
And stuff 24 units up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Well, you would, yeah, right. So I think it's a balance, you want to get the kind of development in the downtown that really complements and expands on the good that's there, the historic properties, the mill, other older properties, and not have properties that really don't fit in. But on the other hand, you want to make the development feasible so that you can get some of those large, higher story buildings that really, I think, create a better downtown ambiance.
So, is it that the zoning regulations restrict both number and square footage that is causing this challenge of basically the second floor you'd only be able to use half of?
Well, you could build bigger units as well. That would be another.
The zoning regulations have
won't allow it.
restrictions on square footage
On-
and unit.
Yeah, in the M2A, I think. I'm not sure in the M2. But these might be, and then you get into who is likely to live in these properties. And so I think maybe 1,000 or 1,200 square feet, if you're thinking about young couples, single people, empty nesters, that might be a good size. You might want to go a little higher than that, but
Where
But-
is the M2? The M2A is the downtown, correct? That's what we just rezoned.
The South Main Street and the corner of Elm.
Yeah, so one question that someone might be able to answer is, are there several 1-acre lots in the downtown?
No, that's the problem. So if you have a quarter-acre lot, you're getting not 2 units, you're getting 1 residential.
1.5. Yeah,
But you gotta
1,
round
yeah.
down, So you get 1 unit.
Yeah.
That's why it's not feasible to do the mixed-use developments in these small lots. And we were identifying, there's so many, like 90% of the lots within the M2 are non-conforming.
So the real areas, for sake of argument, that would have 1 acre or larger would be, based on what I'm hearing, would be sort of outside the middle of the downtown.
Yeah, but the density relative to acreage it doesn't matter what zone you're in, all density is relative to 1 acre.
I appreciate that, but as far as really having 1 acre lots, understanding that,
Yeah.
there really aren't 1 acre lots in the downtown area per se
Correct.
available. It would really be more out either past Elm Street to the north or past, in the Rite Aid area or Bennett Way area. that's where you'd have larger lots, correct?
That's correct there, yeah.
Okay.
Well, there are some
There's,
lots in the downtown, like, the post office has potential for redevelopment, as the post office, wants to sell it.
This post office planning to sell their property?
Post offices in general, excuse me, they're not in the business of owning property anymore. They're in the business of leasing it or renting it off another place. So that's just, yeah.
We've already researched that with the NCDC. The post office does not own that building. The post office leases, or it has like a $0 lease, $1 lease. It's, I think it's the Department of Agriculture through some grant in the 60s that actually built that building.
So who owns the lot?
I believe it's Department of Agriculture.
Which is a federal?
It is a federal entity.
So other than, just to get a sense of what is, so other than the post office property, are there any other larger lot areas in the downtown?
Well, let's look at the map, because
Yeah, but to answer your question, M2, there's only 5 that are an acre or larger, and M2A.
Okay.
But I wouldn't write off the post office as an area that has potential for redevelopment, just because it has something on it. They might be, the agriculture department might be very interested in selling to a developer and who would lease space back to the post office. So, I think there's a couple of key lots in the M2A zone that could make a really big difference. But you're right, most of them are small. So the B2 and the B3 zones, in my view, don't offer a lot of opportunity. I think they were zoned that way at a time when people were thinking that, manufacturing was a possibility. I don't see much opportunity for a manufacturing facility in the area, given what's happening to manufacturing generally and some of the limitations and disadvantages of these sites and the town as a location for manufacturing, or for large-scale office development. I don't think this would be where a developer would have a preference, would see this as a competitive or relatively desirable location for that. And you just have infrastructure limitations. You have, a 6-ton truck limit on New Road. We'll talk about some of the access issues. Is like a heavy-duty pickup truck. Your infrastructure just doesn't support those kinds of uses. There's water and sewer issues on those sites as well. So when we get into the recommendations, well, I was doing some research, and this is certainly not by all means the only option, but I think one option to consider is something along the lines of a continuing care retirement community, because you're seeing these pop up as people age, and even though a lot of people go to the warm weather, a lot of people like to stay near their families, or they like it here, and we're seeing a lot of these properties in New England. These are, very actively managed, so you don't get into issues of a developer who does a bad job or who's not taking care of his property. Demand on town services is limited because all the services are pretty much self-contained within and provided within that facility. And the town, I think, is a great location. It offers a lot of outdoor recreation amenities, access to a lot of interesting venues. A lot of these communities, they organize field trips. You can go to Boston, you can go to Portsmouth, you can go to Portland. A lot of these communities, they want to have enrichment activities. You're near UNH. A lot of more and more of these communities are partnering with higher education institutions to provide programs for their residents. You have your walkable downtown, which I would call interesting, and you can make it more interesting, and proximity to regional hospitals. So this kind of gets into recommendations, but I just as we're talking about the B2 and 3 zones, wanted to throw this out as something that might be another way of getting better use out of those zones, rather than having them sit there and hoping that something that probably isn't going to come down the road will someday. All right, so let's look at the different M and B districts. So I divided them up into 3 categories. The first one is districts that I see as having development potential, districts with significant barriers to development, and districts that are essentially already built out and you won't see you're not likely to see any development on them. This is, the B1 zone. They call it center of town, maybe a little south of the downtown. You do have a site here, which is about 5 acres, which has development potential. And then you have this big site here, but you have really difficult access issues. It's a large site.
Peter, just excuse me, but for
Yeah.
people at home, can you just pick a landmark so people understand where we're looking
Okay,
at?
this is the self-storage, okay? So, and actually there's a little bridge in the self-storage, but it's like really narrow, so, the only potential, other than building a railroad crossing, might be to widen that bridge and maybe make it able to carry more weight, and then, move traffic in through this little area here. So,
And 108 would be,
this one, 108 here,
okay,
okay?
thank you.
And then most of the other,
Where's the industrial park on that?
industrial park is south of there.
Yep, so it's further, well, to the
So it's
bottom.
really, here's New Road, I think, right?
Yeah.
That's the beginning of New Road?
Yeah, right there.
Yeah.
But a 4-acre development could be a small office or medical park, for instance.
Which,
And that 4 acres, it has access, or you'd still need to buttress?
That's right, that's right off of 108. It's right
that's
there.
all wet, I mean, that
That's all
drops.
wetlands.
Yeah.
I don't think so, hold
Yeah,
on.
it's come before the planning board. There's about a half an acre of developable land unless you get a wetlands crossing.
Where the
There's
house
about
is,
another acre on the upland side.
Is a wetland,
You need a wetlands crossing to develop any
Okay.
wetlands.
okay, I
That's
didn't
the
see.
Weiner, the little house.
I think
Yeah.
there's some, at least some of that is, it's not all wetlands, right?
it pretty
No,
much,
you've got a tiny little, you've got about a half an acre on 108,
Mm-hmm.
and then you've got about an acre, if you can get the wetlands crossing, of developable land,
Mhm.
adjacent to the railroad tracks.
So at best, you could get something pretty small on that site. And I think this larger site is difficult.
2 pinball machines and a
Hmm?
pizza parlor.
Right.
So
Well, the only reason the larger site's difficult is access, because it's on the
Yeah.
other side of the railroad tracks.
the large site,
The 19 acres.
yeah. And then if you think about coming in from New Road, you go through residential property, I guess you'd have to get some kind of an easement or a taking. So, ideally, your commercial sites would be directly accessible from a highway. And again, you get into the weight restrictions on New Road.
The weight restrictions on New Road, do we know what those are?
6 tons,
6 tons?
yeah.
That's the bridge
Which is
restriction,
basically
isn't
what
it?
the bridge is.
Well, they put it, like, I noticed today as because I wanted to look at New Road again, I turned onto New Road at the north end, and immediately it said 6-ton weight restriction.
Mhm.
So I think that maybe they're assuming you're gonna go over the bridge, but the road itself seems to have a restriction on it.
So that's true, Steve, in Newmarket, that our roads are
That's-
weight restricted?
You can put some on it, I'm assuming they must have adopted it at that point in time and just said, look, like Peter was saying, we'll just do it the whole road, but I'll
Yeah.
double check to make sure.
Yeah, I
But,
think,
You could probably,
what I've heard is it's
Yeah.
an old farm road that doesn't have the base to really run. When they wanted to do the oil, the oil company that wanted to
Yeah.
put their company, I think it was Pru Oil at the time, people were forgetting the traffic. They were concerned
The base.
about the weight of the trucks on the road. So it's, I just don't know enough about old farm roads, but my sense is they can't sustain heavy truck traffic constantly without
Yeah.
needing a lot of work. So,
So here we have the B1 zone north of the Durham town line. You have one site here that's 3 3/4 acres about. I think this site has potential, although some of it is wetlands. And then you have a lot of small, I think there's a lot of small residential properties here that could be potential for conversion to office space.
And they could be annexed or something. I think you referenced that at some
Mhm.
point, that if two parcels were combined into one, so you had
You
two-
could do that,
Or
yeah.
even downtown, if there were 2 quarter-acre parcels, you could make 1 half-acre parcel, or,
Yes,
I mean,
yes. So
obviously.
you might have a couple of buildings, you might consolidate the parcels and have 2 or 3 buildings, which you turn into an office
Yeah,
complex.
okay.
And this is closer to the downtown,
isn't
right?
it,
So,
where is, McDonald's adjacent to all this?
the McDonald's?
This is north.
This is the Durham town line
Oh,
here.
this is toward Durham.
I'm
Okay,
sorry,
I
yeah,
got
this
it.
is the Durham town line, so this is way up the top.
Okay, so we just went from okay, so we went basically from the middle, now we're in Durham, toward Durham.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought, okay, got it.
I tried to put it in zone order,
Okay,
uh,
I see.
rather than geographic order.
All right.
So, yeah, so I was saying that this lot has, some development potential, but does have wetlands. And this is the reason that there are empty lots here, but you have all wetlands here, so there's very little potential here. But down here, where you have those small lots, you don't run into those problems, although you have a parking issue, because I think you need 1 space for every 250 square feet if you do office. And you might not have that. Although if it's multifamily residential, if it has 3 or 4 units, they also have parking requirements, so in some cases it might balance out. But parking could be an issue in trying to promote conversions down in this area. All right, this is the M2 zone. It's very big, so it's very hard to see. Just to, as an aside, to thank Steve and Diane for going over these maps with me and helping me to understand where we actually have some potential for development or redevelopment or conversions. But there's some small residential parcels in this area that have potential for conversion. I think here, I am considering, although, the post office is there, this and perhaps consolidating with this parcel in the rear would provide a pretty big parcel for development pretty close to the center of the downtown. Really in the center of the downtown, right? And then,
Great for a parking garage, the back.
yeah, your parking garage is part of the development.
Multi-level.
Yeah, no idea.
And then, as I understand it, there's some potential of relocating the Amtrak station to this area here from Exeter, because there's some difficulties in Exeter.
I
Which
know there's potential, I think it was a wish.
A wish?
Yeah.
Okay, let's say a wish. Which, if it ever did come to pass, could spur some surrounding commercial development.
Where are
Might
you
be
at
it.
this point?
Here,
You're actually on Beach Street.
that's right, isn't it? This is the
Yeah.
tracks
Okay.
here,
Yeah,
so it'd be somewhere around here.
So, where the senior center is?
yeah, right.
Okay.
Now, in the M2 zone and the M2, there's some, I think, the M2 zone and the M3 zone, R&D is not a permitted use. And in my view, as long as you don't have Category 4 biolabs, which are like killer microorganisms, that that R&D should be a permitted use. In most cases, R&D is very small scale, wet labs that don't have any public safety issues. And I think, given where the economy is going and the interest in, or at least my view that some things can come out of UNH that might want to locate down here, I
So
think you
could we stay
might want to
on the
relook.
Category 5 stuff? Is
Yeah,
that-
I think you would just say, a Category 1 or Category 2
Oh.
biolab. Those are
Yeah.
pretty safe for the public.
That's good.
All right, yeah, and the M2 zone includes this, the downtown district overlay. Okay, the M2A zone, north at the Lamprey River. You know, I guess I understand that Chinburg is planning to do something on this site here, and, you know, it seemed to me, and getting into this question of, you know, low-density, single-story buildings versus trying to do something that might be 2 or 3 stories here. This is also pretty much in the center of downtown, that this could be a missed opportunity if what he's going to do is a single-story, sort of a strip mall type
Is that
development,
grocery
would you
store
call it?
land?
It's 10,000 square foot retail.
Yeah.
That's the parking for the mills, isn't it, too, in there?
Correct. Yeah, that's all the parking for the mill, so there's very limited development potential of that site.
But I think if you wanted to put something along 108, here's a place where it would be nice to have something a little taller than a single story.
But it was B1 at the time,
Okay.
so it was just commercial.
So what you would
Oh,
have to
okay.
do is you'd have to do like a parking garage or something, if you really wanted to address the parking, and what he's talking about, it would have to be like multi-level in theory, right?
Correct.
With parking, even to a point where it could be, I mean, we're just talking. I don't know who's gonna fund all this, but you could do underground parking, and you could get some levels, and then you could have some retail space, and then you could have either residential up above or parking up above.
Well, if he's only doing, what, 10,000 square feet? So is
That's
that
all
like
that's,
this area here?
Well, no, that's permitted for a restaurant.
Okay.
conversion.
And where is he doing it?
Right at the back.
In the back
The
here?
back along Spring Street is the 10,000 square foot, because everything in between is all the parking for the mills. For the residential and commercial use of the mills.
And why would he not want to put the residential closer to 108?
No,
And put the
he's
parking
putting
behind
he's
it.
putting the parking closer. to-
And not the residential, the commercial, closer to 108.
Because of the wanting, it's hard to get tenants to walk and be extra.
Hmm.
spaces. And then there's access issues in and out. Where if it's in the backside on Spring Street, you've got a different,
You got
Egress
the
and
library, isn't the library
that's
like
the,
right here?
right, and that's all the library, both of those sites
Yeah, so
here.
you got the library here, and then you've got the parking, so there's really no easy access to come in from 108 there, so they have to come in this way.
Mhm.
That's the problem.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I thought it was,
I would think, though, I mean, just in-
Something to think about, though. It's
Yeah,
like, oh,
Yeah,
wow.
in general,
All right.
I don't know all the specifics of every site
Well,
and
no,
what the
it's up
issues are,
there.
but in general, I think these are the kinds of sites where you would really want to fill them in and have a nice streetscape along Route 108 here, because the mill's right here, right?
Yeah.
Truthfully, if this wasn't, or if this ship wasn't already sailing, seeming you're getting ready to leave port, it is a fairly significant lot that probably has more potential than a grocery store way in the back and parking in the front, just as a thought, but
No, certainly, I mean, as a developer, if there's a way that he's making more money off the same land base, I would think
I thought
that
it was a-
any developer, landowner would look at that.
Right. That's a good point.
I mean, the access from 108, well, yeah, so the access, I don't know enough about it, I suppose you can do anything, but you need access right now off of Elm Street into Spring Street, correct?
The current access is off of Spring Street
And
and
you'd have to go through-
108.
Can they get into that parking lot from 108 right now?
That is the access, permitted access is right through the right-of-way through the town lot. That was deeded over, that's all been recorded. Correct.
And further down.
Yeah, and then it's connected over to the old Regal parking lot, so right across from the mill.
Oh, you mean that, but it's really going by the library to get,
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't
That
take that
is
into
the access,
consideration.
yeah.
Okay.
Which is the main access, quote unquote.
Now, whether that changes to access off of Elm Street instead and not off
The
of Spring, or...
redevelopment of the lot of primary access for the commercial is off of Spring Street.
The other thing this doesn't really give you a sense of is the elevation difference. Because there's a pretty significant elevation difference from
Yeah.
the restaurant. I mean, you're talking about what, 10 feet, 8 feet at least? That's a pretty good jump.
From
Main
Main Street
Street?
to the up,
From Main Street downtown,
where Riverdale was, the restaurant, that's
That's
a-
right, yeah, it
it's a
does.
wall. See, this doesn't really give you a sense of that, Peter. This makes it look like you can just drive on in. You'd have to drive on up.
Well, no, it's all
It's
flattened
not-
out now.
It's the, only the Polish Club is higher.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, toward the library, I understand.
The other, where all the riprap is, which is that dark area,
0.64.
0.64, is that what you're
Yeah.
saying? That's a riprap retaining wall.
Hmm.
So that's the big elevation change from the Polish Club parking lot, which is on the bottom of that slide, to the mill parking lot.
That is the last big parcel, really, in the
Yeah.
downtown.
As a general point, I guess I would say, you know, if the town, you know, in my recommendations, I urge the town to be more proactive about going after the kind of development it wants and having a vision of what kind of development it wants for downtown. And, you know, this would seem like a situation where you might want to sit down with the developer and say, let's think about what we can do here, rather than something that is okay, but you could do something so much better. Can we think about it? Can we see what the feasibility of it is? Let's explore something that would really make more effective use of that parcel, because it is so central to the downtown and one of the few large parcels left. Okay.
Who owns the library, by the way? Is that town-owned? I'm
Yes.
guessing
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
And the parcel adjacent to it, that is the access, is also town-owned.
Okay.
This is now south of the downtown, but some of these sites, which I think are residential, some of which are deteriorated, could be good candidates for conversion to commercial or mixed use. I think this site, I think, is vacant.
Where are we now? Can we name?
Now we're south of,
Yeah, I know that,
The,
but
Wentworth Douglas and Dan Wright's building, the Cheney property in the front.
yeah, I guess
You
this
know,
is,
the medical
oh, this is the
center.
medical,
Just south
So
of
the
most-
medical office
Okay.
facility
so
here.
most of the stuff on the west is kind of new and nice and updated, correct?
Mhm.
And most of the stuff on the east is a little more traditional.
Correct.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
How's
this
that
side
for
could
folks?
offer more potential. I think, this lot is vacant, I believe, is it?
No, they
No?
all have,
Okay.
there are no vacant lots, other than down by Rite Aid. which
Oh, yeah,
is the
this
last
lot, this is the big vacant lot
That's the
here.
only vacant.
Yeah, that's right. So that has some potential. That's about
This one, that over there?
0.75?
.75, not so big, but it's empty and could be
And it's owned
redeveloped.
by Rite Aid.
But some of those areas are ones that, weren't they looking to buy a few of those and aggregate them and do some development, Val?
The Cheney properties, so those three that are part of the medical,
Right.
you just have really like low tax value
Right.
properties up there.
And the .21 on the top is actually owned by the town.
The big
Is
one.
that Exeter Street thing that we
This
bought
one here?
years ago?
That's, there was a house that burned. Yeah,
Near the railroad or something?
yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
That we paid 140 for or something that's rather worthless now? That one? Okay.
Okay. Here's the M3. I guess a lot of these properties are residential. There may be some potential for more mixed use. We were talking about maybe this would be a good area for some B&Bs.
M3 is
Where-
the school.
where are we now?
Lansing
Now we're at
South
the
is school.
M3, so
Yeah, I
here's
just
the high,
wanted, what's the
Yeah.
name?
here's the high school.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, I
And
know,
then,
we're off 152.
Yeah.
yeah, we're on 152 here. So depending on what the town's decision is, if you decide to build a new high school over here, you're gonna have this building here, which might make an interesting, co-space for technology startups or some kind of a
What's
multi-tenant
that building now?
facility.
High school.
That's the high school.
And they're gonna give, I see. They're
Or if
gonna
it's
build a
not-
new one and they're gonna give that
Give
one
that
out.
out.
Okay.
Well, and then if this isn't built, then there's a question of what should go here.
I see.
And then if, I guess if everybody goes to high school in Durham, then both the sites are available.
Well, we could build 2 new schools for elementary and
Still
then,
have a
Okay.
junior high need.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
That's the junior, senior high school, and you still have a junior high school need.
Okay, okay.
So,
But it's gonna be in one place or the other, right?
you know what's good in a way though? Peter is looking at this without all of our
It's
stuff.
Excellent.
So it's good because like we're all mired in
He has
oh,
no
but that's
language.
gonna be a middle school now, and that's gonna be a track. And he's going, what? Nothing against middle schools and tracks, but.
Well, anyway, this is an awfully big site, and I guess if you don't build a new high school, I mean, there's some opportunity there. And, you know, being fairly close, this is fairly close to the downtown, right?
Yeah.
Is there a wetland overlay for this area?
I don't have that with me, but I don't think it has a wetlands issue. The wetlands are down here, you can't do anything down here. But I don't think up here you have a
Yeah,
wetland.
I think
on
there
the
is
backside
something
of
up
it.
there on the backside, but it's not huge. or
I don't think
there's
it's
some
huge.
consideration to be given
Yeah.
to it.
Just
Okay.
Just
Oh, yeah.
one question.
Yeah.
This was, this is an M3 zone, which, there's there's a sand pit there? Yes, no?
No, that's the
No,
B3.
That's the B3.
Yeah.
So,
This is, you know, playing field for the, I guess for the high school. And
Yeah, then you get the
And this is
terrace.
wetland.
and then what, it
Lands, yeah.
transitions right into the B3, or?
No.
These are this is an R1, I think.
Oh.
It's
Yeah.
R3. That's
So
how
it's some more, of the M zones, it's really more residential, I would say, than any of the others.
Well, it was zoned this way because you had you had commercial going on there when the rezoning happened. So Lamprey Healthcare was there, and then they were starting to take over other buildings as they grew, residential, and converted them to office use. And then you had Carpenter's Greenhouse, which was a big portion of the land. Perkins was there.
And that's
Other
closed now,
people were
right?
running offices out of their house, so that's how it became the M3,
Yeah.
a transitional area before you got to the residential section again.
Now we're getting into the areas with barriers to development. So here, this is the Newfields line, so this is the B1, little slice of B1 down at the Newfields line. And you have serious access issues here, because either you have
Is that
a right-of-way.
Is that Wilson right there?
So, I mean, potentially, and this is wetlands, so the only place where you'd have access from 108 is here. This is all wetlands, and it's privately owned, so you need some kind of a right-of-way, some kind of an easement or eminent domain, and I don't know about building a road over wetlands, that's probably an issue. So this has big access issues for,
Oh my God, there's so many
Yeah.
ways to get in there. So this is just showing the B1 zone.
yeah, we'll get to the B2, but, yeah, this is just the B1 down at the
Right.
Newfields line,
So
yeah.
the Wilson property is the larger parcel?
Is that this one, or,
The one with that
I believe,
20.23?
The back one.
I believe the Wilson is,
Right.
I thought it was more than 20 acres.
And
but it
that's
could-
20 right there.
Right, but the land to the upper right is all of the portion that was just deeded to the town. which
right,
is the
so.
large acreage, which
So
is
you've
the-
got B1 and B2 here, both, and this property,
the
and
property to the
this
right.
property is the
town owns now.
town's.
The deed was
That was
recorded
the,
this year. The Ham property, it was, Shearwater,
Shearwater, thank you.
Conway.
Oh,
Shown on the next slide.
okay.
Yeah,
No.
and
Because they
here's the
didn't
health
have it
club,
in
which,
the Time period they were supposed to.
if the continuing care retirement community was here, they could go right over to the health club, but you also have problems, the access issues
Yeah.
Hold on, I don't.
apply to everything, so
Isn't
it's
the,
just,
It was in my hands.
isn't the area to the right, can you go back to
Okay.
that other slide?
this is the area to the right.
See, it's the same thing.
This is it, here. And the town, as I understand, the town owns this property and these properties.
Correct,
And,
So
And
that's
then-
the, is that the Ham?
yes.
Okay.
and this is
Phase
the
two of the
industrial
industrial
park
park.
here.
I know, can you just go back to the slide before for 1 second, because I
Yeah.
think there's a misconception.
Was
This
that the
property-
piece that they were supposed to develop?
The property to the right, right there,
Mm-hmm.
Here?
that's not the Ham property.
Well, no, that's Lionel, sorry.
I know, so you
Lionel's in
just said that
between.
was the Ham property,
I'm
yeah.
sorry.
That's not the Ham.
Labonte in between.
The Ham property is up here.
Right.
Yeah.
Wait.
It goes forward,
Mhm.
excuse me, it goes
Yeah.
to the north of the Wilson. If you go back to the back slide, just for 1 second, just so we know what we're talking about. The Wilson is right there in the
Mhm.
middle. And then the Ham is, if you kept going straight up, that's the Ham, somewhere in there, that's about 20-odd acres, give or take. And then Lionel's is the last piece, which is somewhere around 200 acres, give or take.
And he's in between, right? They're not contiguous, Wilson and Ham. Is
But-
that correct?
No, Ham and Wilson
But is-
does somehow, I don't know if they are contiguous or not, but I believe they
I
are,
think it's right there.
I believe they are connected. I
Okay, this is
believe-
the B1 zone here that we
Right.
were looking at.
So that's
So is this
Wilson.
not the town-owned land here?
That's the Ham,
That is the town-owned land.
Okay, and then this is also the
And all the
town.
town-owned.
yeah.
That we just got.
And then you have this huge,
And that's Labonte's.
No, and, well, no, that, yeah, the 158 is,
Labonte.
yep, and then the piece in the middle is the Ham, so that 38, and then all the stuff in the middle was where Boise Cascade, just so everybody
Shearwater.
knows, was
Yeah.
kind of taking us for a little tour around the mulberry bush. And we were gonna cross, where's the industrial park? Can you put your little pointer where the
yeah,
industrial park is?
right here.
Mhm.
And here's the railroad track.
So this is where they were gonna originally cross into this area. And that's where they were gonna do the Celestica building in 1990-ish, 1988. That was the
Mhm.
original plan.
Yeah, well, it goes back to when the industrial part was developed and the railroad crossing that never got done.
Yeah.
Because that was phase 2 of the industrial part.
So what are you basically saying, Peter, if in a perfect world with access issues, is that what you're saying could theoretically be some type of housing for senior or some kind of use in that format?
Yeah, I think if you could solve the access issues, and they may be easier to solve for a residential facility, but I would see that as a good location, because you got the golf course over here, and you have the health club over here, and they're not too far from the downtown, and, you know, to develop this as an industrial site, or to extend the industrial park, I don't see the market for it, really. And I think the access issues are more acute when you have to deal with large trucks, say, for instance. And as I understand it,
Well, we've been
the issue
going
of
at
trying to
it
get a
since
railroad
88.
crossing over here is
So
pretty difficult.
so the challenge of a railroad
I'm sorry?
crossing,
Come in off New Road.
Coming off the road.
Yeah.
the challenge of railroad crossings in today's world is significant.
Yeah.
Wherever regardless of where the railroad crossing is, that's a pretty large challenge these days.
Yeah.
It always was, but it's, my understanding, having the history was, it was before we had high speed. Celestica was going to potentially put their building there. And it was like $1 million and change to do the crossing back in the day. And you always need the permission of the owner of the railroad.
I think that's a problem, a systemic problem right
They
now,
have it.
is the owner of the railroad.
Yeah, back then.
Back then we had it. We still have it?
No, that's,
You probably need a different, because I'm wondering if the crossing at that time was a bridge, or was it just a crossing?
No, it was a
no, it was
crossing.
crossing.
Probably now
It
you
was
would need.
There was
before-
no high-speed
It was
train.
before
That
Amtrak,
crossing.
that's the
Yeah.
issue.
Even with the, but I'm thinking with Amtrak, with the passenger
Yeah,
train.
You can't do an at-grade now.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You can't do that grade with Amtrak.
So-
It takes the ability
So,
away.
right, so it'd be really, even if
But-
you could do it,
but-
it'd be very costly.
And one last thing on that.
Yeah.
Before all that, that was going to be, if you go up to the old Bodett property, when it was originally
This-
sold, that was gonna be tied into New Road, and it was gonna be a cul-de-sac. That was the original plan. If you go further north, into that 158 further
Mhm.
north, a little higher up, that's what I was told, that was gonna be they actually had the permits, and then the developer went bust.
Yeah, the
Jay
TIF,
Pro-
So they were gonna access it from New
Well-
Road?
Yes.
no, I'll just explain it, because, Jay, were you on NCDC at the time? So the TIF district for down here, Black Bear, when that was
Well, that happened in 19.
at the
late-
very
late-
top, not in the B2 zone.
Oh, here?
The plan was to come in here off of that, remember that wetlands property that we talked about?
Mm-hmm.
The larger acre parcel? That was, it's
From the
really
north?
limited. Yeah,
The
just
5 acre
the
parcel?
north of here, right. You'd come in through that parcel, to access
Ah.
the Labonte parcel.
But that wasn't
And
a
then
TIF
the
then.
back center.
That wasn't a TIF.
No, that was the basis of the Black Bear TIF, was coming in, and the design work was for the access at that end. When the TIF was presented to the voters, that would have been the access. And in the bonding that was authorized at that time was based upon that upper access, nothing to do with New Road or the bridge.
Is that access?
Well, how,
So I
how,
thought the TIF was based
it would
on
not
the
come in,
railroad
it would not
crossing.
come in off of New Road? What
No,
would it
would
come in off of?
108, off the Voyner property, which is that large acre parcel we were talking about that's all wetlands, and the parcel behind it to cross over the railroad tracks and come in
You're talking about this
through
one
the Labonte property and then the back end.
Is that? a
Okay, but now you'd have to
access?
build a railroad bridge and.
It would've been a bridge.
You,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, it would have been a bridge.
Is
Okay.
is
That
that a
was the-
doable access if, for say, a continuing care or something like that, just because we're on that thing? Is that a doable access still if to
It was
put a-
determined to be at the time.
Okay.
Wouldn't it make more sense to improve New Road up to the point of access into this area that the town owns, rather than build a railroad crossing? which
Except
probably-
that we have to get agreement from the town of
Still need-
Newfield.
Okay.
That may be I don't know how difficult that would be, but.
And have the state, would the state pay to upgrade the bridge or replace the
Yeah, in the
bridge?
year 2008.
If you gave them the money, they might approve it.
Yeah, right, I mean, gave it to 'em.
Yeah,
Okay,
we're-
that
we're
sounds
on
like a good deal.
The bridge is several million,
Yeah.
and we're on a list now of, but it's so far down the road
Yeah.
that you're not gonna see it realistically, until maybe 20, 30 years, realistically with DOT, how far behind they are with funding. But anyway.
But the Labonte property in Newfields that was just approved was approved with the intersection and the turning lane off of 108
Right.
and an access exit onto New Road. That is all laid out.
Okay.
Yeah, because the Stratum Tire's in there now.
Yeah, and
I
that
think
was-
it's Stratford Tire.
It's all
Stratford.
paved now,
Stratford.
just-
Stratford.
And what do you think would be the potential of having a road off of 108 here before you get to the tracks to go in this direction? Is that realistic in any way?
It's money.
Yeah,
But it's better than building a bridge.
but you still gotta
Oh,
get
no,
across
it'd still be a bridge across the
You still gotta get
railroad
across
track.
it.
No, I'm saying down here, in this little,
Closer to the line.
right here,
Closer to the line.
you haven't gone over the railroad tracks on the other
Oh,
side.
but that's a bridge in and of itself.
Yeah.
Oh,
that
this
you're
is a
trying
bridge
to come
here.
off of.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
big drive.
Okay.
and it's-
So you've got big issues here.
We've been looking at this
Yeah.
for 12 years.
Yeah,
That's just since we've been looking, really looking.
how are they getting across, I haven't been down that road, the new road where the Stratum Tire is,
Mhm.
how do they address the railroad track down there?
They don't have to,
They-
because.
Oh, that's right, it's down
their
this side, you're right.
development
Yeah,
is
they're
on
on
this
the,
side,
they're
it
on
runs
the
behind
southern,
them.
they're on the
I
southerly
didn't think of
side.
that, you're right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the long and short of it is, that the bridge is, call it a few million, just to call it something. And then you gotta deal with the road. I'm talking about for truck traffic, if you
Yeah.
really wanted to do industrial, if that was the goal, which is, it seems to have been. And the other option is the railroad crossing down where the industrial park was, which was the original concept, at least that's how I understood.
But,
So,
but if
But the
you-
bridge would be less costly than a railroad crossing, right?
I don't think so.
Really?
But
The
if,
bridge is,
But it is a
It'd be-
bridge.
it
going
would have
over
to be
the
a railroad bridge.
Exactly.
but what if if we did go to Newfields, or the developer, and say, look, that new road that you're putting down across from Dunkin' Donuts that way, could that be possibly the access to this lot?
No, because he's still
Still
this
the
side
road
of the
bridge
track.
would lead
Right.
to the bridge.
Oh, that's right.
Still
Yeah.
deal with the
Okay.
bridge.
Yeah, it's good.
And you got the
It'd
big
be
truck
right
in the
there,
road,
yeah.
so you always want to move
So
it
what
down
are,
and go
what
straight.
other options do we,
Well,
other
there's
than?
something like, some kind of a residential community. Now, I can't even say, if you had one of these larger retirement communities, would you need to, deliver things by trucks that would be too heavy to go over that bridge? Could you do some kind of tax increment financing to finance the bridge as part of the project? But absent that, it
Is
seems
there
like residential, just general R1 type residential would make more, would make, other than leaving it the way it is and getting no value out of it, would seem to be, I would say I would explore some alternatives, and if nothing pans out, at some point, I think you have to rezone either the B2 or both the B2 and B3, so that you can get some value out of it.
I mean, bear in mind, the town didn't buy the Wilson farm until, what, the early 2000s?
Correct.
So-
That was well after
So the
whole
Wilson,
TIF
yeah,
thing.
so the Wilson was just, that was about, they were gonna do workforce housing, just so you know, on the Ham property, which was owned at the time by Shearwater, which was Conway. So so the Wilson was gonna be accessed with car traffic over the bridge. And then they were gonna do a road from the Wilson to the Ham, which I really never understood, because I don't know why you would drive a road to get to the Ham property to do workforce housing, but all that being said, I suppose is there a market for senior housing right now? I don't know what the market is.
Well, I think you really
I think
have
there
to-
is.
I think what you
Yeah.
really have to do is figure out, are we saturated in this market for
That's
senior
why I'm
housing?
asking, 'cause
Because
you
you
have
have
Riverwoods,
Riverwoods,
yeah.
and you have Spruce Woods, and then you've got a couple in Dover.
I think you have these big regional national companies that develop these properties, and a next step would be to have some conversations with them to see whether.
Sullivan Erickson or something
Yeah.
like that to
I
come
think
in.
if they look at this as like, they can have quite a lot of acres there, what they're looking for now is like to put up the
Big.
3 or 4 story big building that everybody's in, and then they have the grounds around it where it's all pleasant for the people to go out and enjoy it.
I mean, as far as access, when you said trucks, there's nothing precluding supplies and whatnot being brought in along New Road, as long as it's not, 50 trucks a day, my guess is, because people aren't gonna be, they weren't too happy about Pru Oil, and that's well before I was on New Road. So, I just don't know, my sense is they're not bringing tractor trailers in, but I don't know enough about elderly
They have to
facilities.
bring in
It's a-
food, they have to bring in
Yeah.
supplies, but it's not like a manufacturing
Right.
facility. So maybe you can get around it. And you also have a lot of wetlands on the town-owned part of the zone, and also the other zones, but that may fit in well into what you're saying, is put the building in a small area,
They
and then you have,
they like
open
to have
space.
water.
Yeah.
They're looking in Portsmouth and they want, we want water and water views.
Well, you-
So if you could turn those wetlands wetter.
yeah, maybe you can make them into a pond.
On land.
Yeah.
They like it better, I think.
Yeah.
Well, wasn't that the original cul-de-sac that was being proposed on the Bodett property, Shay, way back in the days? Well,
It was, Gary, because
Yeah,
it was
because
going to
I-
be multiple commercial buildings would have been on that whole access area of that, all that. And when we say the Bodett property, it was also would be the Levante property too.
yeah, I remember speaking to one of the principals without, getting into the whole thing, and my understanding was the developer bought the land for like 900,000, give or take, and then he lost his funding in the late 80s. And that was gonna be a cul-de-sac with housing. Now, just along that line, that could be a cul-de-sac with housing for maybe, instead of a conglomerate like Riverwoods, for sake of argument, everything here has to be 3 stories and a campus, but maybe something in between, like moderate, where, they have in Rye, the Webster, there's facilities like that accommodate and have quality, care. But anyway, that's,
I think they have different designs. Some of them are, like what you're saying, 3 or 4 stories. Some of them might be a little bit more spread out and more look like townhouses or or a combination of the two. You know, I don't know enough about it to say exactly what it would look like. It probably depends on the circumstances and the site.
What-
That's one
Yeah.
story, yeah.
What's the one that's owned in Portsmouth, by the Ramses? Do you know, what's it
Yeah,
called?
that one is, not Webster, it's,
Because I
oh my
visited
God,
that.
that was my grandfather's, garage. It's-
We should move along if we're gonna get through
It's
this.
right down, right
Yeah,
off of
let's get to
Pleasant
the-
Street.
Yeah,
We're almost
the-
done with this.
The point is, it's not on a highway.
Correct,
They
it's right
don't
in
ha-
town.
It's in a very scenic area,
Mhm.
and it's not, you know, I don't see tractor trailers going in there, so. To Bill's
Correct.
point, why don't we kind of move along? It's,
Yeah.
You know,
I
But
mean,
I think everyone agrees, the issue for any of that land is access.
I mean,
And,
always has been.
right. and
the
if
last,
it's-
sorry.
if you think about having a developer need to bear the funding of that access, I can't imagine there's any use for that property that would be feasible. You know, if it's $2 million to do the access, and the acquisition cost of the land.
So the last point I'd like to make, should we reconsider and rezone that to residential? Or, you know, if business is not going to come in, and you could probably build homes in there and get some tax revenue from that.
Well, I mean, we spent 620,000 or 650,000 for the Wilson property that we burned down the house, and it's now has a value of, somebody said 150,000 or something without the house, so whatever it is, but
Those are all some
Could you do a
costs. Those
TIF
are
and
decisions already made.
fund the
So can we
bridge,
get, as
like
Bill said,
bridge
can we move on
strengthening
to good
through the
decisions tomorrow?
tax revenues, you know, over 20 years or,
There was a tip
There was a
there.
whole
Yeah.
tip to do that,
but it's
It was
it's
percentage.
untiffed.
Yeah.
untiffed,
there's nothing happened for 20 years.
Yeah.
Right.
right.
There's
Well,
probably not gonna be anything there.
probably 15
Well, I think, you know, if you had a developer of a large-scale facility like that, and you had the person in hand, the developer in hand, and you had a project, you could think about tax schemes to fund the bridge reconstruction or improvement, you know, if it made sense financially to do it, if you
It's
came
like-
out ahead.
And that's been the,
Yeah, I don't know.
anyway.
Yeah, okay,
Because
so,
it doesn't make sense commercially.
no.
It didn't make sense residentially either, but let's
Okay.
just go on.
Okay, so, and then you have
Please
your,
go over
your
discussion.
B3 zone, which, you know, probably is the least, makes the least sense as a B zone. It's most remote from your, you know, your large regional highways. Some of the properties have no access. You have the gravel pit, which, you know, could be filled in, but, you know, I don't see it as an attractive place, location for commercial development. And I think, Steve, you mentioned that, whoops, this area may have remediation issues, and then, of course, you're right on top of the town aquifer. So that puts a lot of limitations on what you can develop. So,
I actually would argue, though, that this may have better chance than
You
the
have-
other area.
you don't have a bridge issue, or a,
But we don't have water and sewer there either.
Currently,
Right,
Yeah, it's not that.
which
but
would
it's
be an
only, what,
issue.
a mile away?
Yeah.
I don't, as a, you know, as somebody who's looking to develop a site, say, for an office park, I mean, theoretically, you might do that, but it just seems so remote. I mean, people have to go from 101 up 108 to
No, I agree.
152.
And they
And
also
there's
can
a
come-
fair amount of traffic on that road a lot of times.
You can also come from 125,
Okay,
and you can also come from the university population. You can come across.
Whichever way you
but-
come,
but
it's
so-
all windy roads and so on.
So there is some way to get there, but it's not as direct as 95
Even 108, it's not as direct as
and 108. 108, the corridors, 108, 95, and 125.
I guess the big question is how, you know, how long do you want to wait? Or in the recommendations, I'm referring more to the downtown development, but my recommendation is the town take a more proactive approach to approaching developers, to marketing what you have. But at some point, if this area doesn't pan out for some kind of business development, again, I think you need to reconsider the zoning,
What,
because, yeah.
How long has
what
it,
about I'm sorry, Gary.
no, I was gonna say, how long has it been zoned this way?
Oh, well before my
Forever.
time.
I thought it was about 6 or 7 years
Leo,
ago.
I think, was on, at least, well more than that.
Well, that's why, was it, has
Like,
any,
When Clay was here, that's when all this was rezoned.
and what was that roughly, ballpark?
10 to
Yeah.
10 to 12 years ago?
So in 2000, give or take, has anything happened since 2000?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah?
Oh, sure.
What's that?
What?
Prue Oil was all permitted to move their facility from,
Yeah.
North Main
To
over to
New
here.
Okay,
But they chose a better site off 125,
okay,
so they're out of town, unfortunately.
yeah,
There's been the permitting for the storage, Ernie Courier's old,
Yeah,
Like
the,
parcel up there for
trailer
sale.
Yeah.
storage.
so there's a
3.3
large,
acres.
commercial,
It's approved for 2 buildings.
it's already approved.
Yeah, already approved for 2 buildings, office and a kind of garage.
is it
Which
happening?
parcel?
That's,
Oh, you have it for
the Weaver.
sale,
I have it for sale, just,
Okay.
it's.
That's what's there
Directly
now.
opposite the, Ash Swamp Road, directly opposite.
That's
That's a
the,
3.3 acre.
right,
And
well,
then the
Prue
Prue
was
one's
behind
above
that.
that.
So my question is, has anything happened?
yes,
What?
storage. The Lee Storage guy that, what's his name?
Okay.
Oh, S&J truck?
S&J.
They-
So, yeah, there's a lot of storage containers that are out on the
Okay.
old Courier lot,
Right.
Gravel pit.
That's a
that-
pretty,
And
pretty
also
low.
storage for the ice cream
You
trucks.
can't tax
You,
those.
right, there's like limited tax.
So
Yeah, I don't
it's
mean-
pretty low
I'm
value.
not trying to be smug. When I say
No, but that's the
something
only-
happening, is anything, we rezoned it 12 years ago with a vision, just like we did
Correct.
some other areas in this town. Has it borne the fruit that was anticipated?
No.
Thank you. So I guess my thought is, just as we're circling, because we're getting close to the end, to the
Yes.
conclusions, I'm hoping. We've zoned a lot of areas in this town, whether it was the area we just talked about, where it was the industrial park, whether it was this.
North Main
There
Street.
were a lot of plans.
Right.
Very few, or I shouldn't say very few, a lot of the plans have not come to fruition. Some have. So I guess the question is, do we shift from the ones that haven't to something else? Is that where we're hopefully gonna go? Like
Yeah,
some plans?
to me, if, you sort of give this zone a chance to, it's out there. You might try to more aggressively market it and see what comes your way, but at some point, if nothing of value is proposed, nobody wants to develop it, then I think you should consider rezoning it. It's also completely surrounded by R1 zoning, so.
What about commercial recreation? Do you see that there's any potential? Because these are gravel pits, reclaimed gravel pits. Some of them are getting to the end, where they're.
So we're like ATVs or something like that?
Is there a market, what are people doing with reclaimed gravel pits? Because that's really what most of that land,
I
the
don't think
large
you
land
want to do a shooting range.
portions
I don't know
are.
if you want to do,
Well, we moved the shooting, it was a shooting range.
Right.
We moved that out of there.
Well,
Yeah,
Strata
that was the
made,
town's shooting range.
Strata made ball fields out of their,
Ball fields? Like commercial
but
ball
I mean, that was
fields?
what town, I mean, they weren't
Town.
commercial, they were town. but-
Yeah.
If you needed more recreational facilities in the town, it could be.
But I mean,
Oh,
I'm
you'd have
thinking,
it.
is there a market,
Motocross doesn't have the market that it used to. You can't have a regional motocross center,
And
JT.
you have a huge, you got a huge state park. I mean, I know it's far away, but
Yeah.
Berlin, the markets to that, so I mean, they're not gonna
Okay.
stop here, they're gonna keep.
and a
going.
lot of those are
They've
so
already thought
noisy,
of
you're
it.
going to have people flipping out with motocross.
Yeah, I'm not the one that brought up motocross or whatever with ATV.
I
I'm
just
saying
threw that out.
commercial-
I just was trying to think
I
what.
just,
I'm thinking, is there an outdoor movie theater movement,
Oh,
but
Put the emphasis
I don't
on
think
the
so.
movement.
I'd be happy to look into anything at least a little bit, if anybody comes up with another idea, just
No, they have
to-
these indoor skating, there's one right near our store where they have a
Right
big
here field.
facility where
Yeah.
they do skateboard and stuff.
Seacoast United.
Yeah, I think you want low impact, things that are not gonna like impact a residential neighborhood where they're hearing motorcycles and go-karts running around all the time.
The traffic coming to the site will impact the neighborhood. 152 doesn't have the ability to handle traffic that Water Country does, or some of these centralized sports.
You do a Six Flags?
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
But I think if you
Just
put
kidding.
a Seacoast United or a soccer facility or something like that up there, I think the traffic.
You think it'll handle the traffic?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Okay.
that would fit in better with the environment there, because you don't wanna put something in that's gonna just be, anyway.
Noisy.
I think something recreational, I think, would fit in with
United did look at the Bolio site.
some of the other recreational amenities that you have here,
Yeah.
the,
Except you are gonna, like,
But-
to do that, you are gonna have the large lights, you know, the floodlights. Like their outdoor facility that they have in Epping, it's like floodlights all over the place. It doesn't go off till 10 o'clock at night.
But we're talking about how many residential parcels here do we really need to mitigate that for?
I think, aren't these residential here?
Very few.
There's not a lot over here.
Well, the
There was
bottom
a
of the
driving range over there that had a lot of light issues that I
You know,
remember.
we're way away from that here. right?
Okay, maybe we should move along, though.
But I would think there's technology to
Not to
mitigate that.
digress.
Yeah.
So, just to really clearly, quickly go through this,
That's a lot of fun.
this is your B2 zone at the Lamprey River. There is a site here,
You
but
can sell it.
it's really not accessible. Right.
All that.
All right, let's.
So
get
these
to
are
the-
just the zones where there's
Yeah.
nothing you can do,
All right, so
basically.
that's most of
Okay,
the
this
town.
is all pretty much
Why, when you say
developed.
there's nothing we can do? I
Well,
mean, what a perfect site for the Durham Boat Club. With access to the Lamprey River over town property.
But we don't own the land between the fire and the river, I don't believe.
you mean here?
Yeah,
But we don't need to own the land.
Yeah.
That's fish and
Sure.
The
game.
Fish and Game owns it.
right.
Yeah, but we don't need to own anything, actually. We just want to try to get something happening.
Right.
And this is the only open parcel which is not really very accessible, so.
But then you have all this town undeveloped land that's part of
This, I
the
think-
treatment plant.
That's hill. that's
This,
a-
I think, did I put, oh, I think that's a lot of wetlands.
No,
There's
it's not a
something,
hill.
hill, it's on a
big
hill.
right?
It's a hill.
And there's a back road
Yeah. it goes
along
right
here that
downtown.
goes right downtown.
Yep.
So do you think something could be done in this area here?
Just down the hill.
Or build on the hill.
Once we locate next to sewage.
Okay,
Okay.
if somebody, people, if anybody thinks there's something I've missed here in these zones that I designated as no development potential, let me know, but we should probably move on. And then I don't think there's anything
I mean,
here.
a lot of
we
these
can
ships have
develop.
sailed. This would have been prime land
This is
to
gonna be-
develop high-end residential, if you want to know the
That would
truth.
have been, yeah, but that was like everybody in the 70s built it
Right on
right
the-
on the river,
Yeah.
late 60s, early 70s.
And then you have the M4 zone, which I guess you're gonna put some residential on, but most of the rest of it is
Can
a
you go
lot of
back?
wetlands, sure. To what?
I think you have a mistaken one, unless that's the name of it.
In what? Which one?
You talked about a Durham housing.
Yeah, what's the-
Oh, I thought, did you say that they're gonna put parking lot for the?
No,
I'm sorry.
there was we got something from CDFA, that Dover Housing Authority.
Dover.
Looked at a building. The,
Oh, the
Select
Selectwood
Oh.
building on Bay Road
Right.
is approved for 14 residential units. And the parking lot next to it is the parking for those residential units.
And this
That's
would
all
be,
Dover
if that,
housing?
that would be
The old
this,
Selectwood
parcel.
building is the,
At
It's the
one
brick
point, it was
building.
proposed for from Housing Authority.
Okay, so
that's
just cross,
privately owned, it's approved for 14
privately owned,
units.
cross the word Durham off there.
so if that doesn't happen, this parcel would be have potential for
Well-
development.
it's part of that brick
It's all
building.
part of
This?
one parcel.
It's approved, they have their permits in hand.
Okay,
to
so
redevelop.
it's gonna happen. Okay.
Well, unless they make more money doing something else.
Okay.
Almost make
It's Lemmy, very Lemmy.
So, so my understanding is that if this housing goes through in the M4 zone, that pretty much wraps up what's gonna happen there.
No, this is still a big
Okay.
parcel here, right
Yeah,
next to
it's
it.
a
There's
big
still a big
parcel.
parcel, 38.49.
Okay.
That's a
Where-
large parcel.
where's
Here, you mean?
Just south,
The
above
M4.
the golf course parcel.
Where is
Yeah,
the
that
housing actually gonna go?
one. Over on the other side.
Here?
Where is it
Up and around.
proposed?
Here?
No.
Closer to
No.
108.
Here.
Yes.
Along the fairway
Okay.
at the top.
Yeah.
So in the middle of
in
that
the wooded
lot.
area.
The
Well,
wooded
so I
area
guess-
along the fairway, coming from 108 and then to the left. Correct.
Okay.
Kind of
No.
surrounding the
So
green
I don't
area
know-
there.
This looks
That's all
like a,
wetlands.
there's a lot of wetland there,
Yeah.
but there is some, I guess potentially you could get a, I mean, it's sort of all surrounded by wetland, so.
The non-wetland area is the portion proposed for redevelopment.
This area here?
Well, you're coming
Or
over to
this
someone
area?
else's
Right
lot.
of one, on 108.
From 108,
Right of that
1,200 feet in would be the road, with the
Uh-huh.
cul-de-sac is the proposal.
Okay.
And
Cool.
then there's another large parcel which abuts this, that also has frontage on New Road,
Which would be what?
that parcel there. That's the old Houshel Farm.
It's hard to see that as a commercial.
How do you get there from New Road?
No,
You gotta-
it'd
It's
be
the farm.
residential.
You go
Residential,
The farm and the old, and there's a lot of highlands through there, that's
You mean
all,
Ashmont Road?
managed wood. Did I say New Road?
Yeah.
Sorry, Gary.
I'm like,
Ash Swamp.
I'm not getting it.
Ash Swamp Road.
That makes sense. You're on the wrong side of the road.
Okay.
Either that or I'm on the wrong side.
So, recommendations. So just sort of some general principles that I put out, that what makes most sense from an economic development perspective is to focus on your downtown and the adjacent areas, to strengthen and sort of build out from your downtown. Like that little diagram, you have the sort of the three pieces of that, which is you need commercial development, you need business development, and you need to get more residents and visitors to come into the downtown. And all those things, you know, to make downtown more successful, all those things have to be approached simultaneously. Raise the town's profile. I think that as I talk to people in doing the research, people from UNH, some other people, and I can't remember who they are now, but I was surprised by the number of people who said, wow, you know, what's happening in Newmarket, you know, I went down there, it's really nice, you know, people don't know about it. I think you really have to raise the profile of the town. And this is an example, I was working in Watertown, Massachusetts, which is in between Cambridge and Waltham, and nobody was thinking of it as a tech location, even though there were things happening there. And now, well, Athena Health is a big medical records company, but they've just made a decision to do a huge investment in growing their company there and building more property. But I think the bottom line here is that you have to have people thinking about Newmarket. You have to get out there and tell your story about what's here and what could be here to raise your profile. And I think that's going to help you in the concrete objectives of actually getting things done. I think you have to look at how your development regulation is done. I don't think there's huge issues, but it's kind of, for me, it's kind of a he said, she said kind of thing. The developers say one thing, the town says something else. I think, as far as I understand, I mean, the town does things pretty well in managing the development process, but you can always do better. Look at ways you can make the process more efficient. Make sure that you're not constantly coming back to developers with additional requests for information or changes. Make sure you're equitable in the way you do things. Treat all the developers equitably. Don't impose certain things on one that you don't impose on another. But at the same time, you don't want to sacrifice the town's interests, and you want to have that vision of what you want things to be like. So you're trying to promote the kind of development that the town wants and not just react to proposals that come in.
I think we've done a lot of that, at least
To-
since, I think we've done a lot of reacting to every kind of development that's wanted to come in.
Yeah.
Some
And I
of
think-
which were good or bad.
Yeah, if you get ahead of that, and I'll talk about that a little bit more, but I think the point is to get ahead of that, don't just react. Try to, I hate the word proactive, try to make things happen the way you envision them, the way you want the community to develop, as opposed to just reacting to any proposal that comes in. You know, you've got to pay attention to your existing business base. You know, there's a lot of companies in town, and in economic development, we realize that keeping your businesses that you have, helping them grow, is a much better way of, it's at least equally important way of maintaining your economic base as attracting new companies to come in. So that's something you have to pay attention. And as we discussed, like, rethink the uses for these larger business zones that really haven't taken off. Yeah.
Could you give some examples of how towns are fostering relationships with existing businesses from the
Well,
town
most of them,
perspective?
yeah. I have a recommendation, because UNH Cooperative Extension, what it's, the common term in economic development parlance is business retention and expansion programs, BREPs, or BRE programs. And it involves going out, doing visitations to companies, having a survey, getting information about them, trying to figure out, are they happy in the town? Do they have issues? Is there a risk that they're going to leave? And then have a mechanism in place to try to address any issues that they have. And it just so happens that the co-op extension at UNH has developed a sort of a turnkey program that they will work with towns to help them set up these programs. And so I think it would make a lot of sense for Newmarket to work with the cooperative extension because they'll provide technical support. They have survey instruments, they have, sort of methodologies. You have to, the town, you have to get some volunteers in the town to do some of the work, but you have a head start here because they have something they want to come out and work with towns and set up these programs. Just sort of going more into this point about being proactive, marketing the town. First of all, be clear about what character, specifically of the downtown, but more generally, what do you want to see? What's your vision of what you want it to become? I think one thing, seems like a lot of the development here has been done by the same developers who've been working here for years. One thing I would suggest is look at some of the other small towns that have been successful in revitalizing their downtowns. Look at the developments that have been done. See some things that you like and think would fit here, and reach out to those developers and see if they have an interest in Newmarket. I worked, or I was on the board of a community development corporation, and one thing we did once, we were going to develop some new housing, and we'd only done rehabs before. And so one thing we did is we identified 5 or 6 projects that had been done by, pretty well-respected architects in the Boston area. And we went out and we looked at each of those projects and we said, do we like the design? How's it holding up? How does it fit in our neighborhood? Sort of keeping a step ahead and trying to interest developers rather than waiting for somebody to come in who might have a proposal that you're not that excited about, but you feel like you have to, give them the opportunity. I think you can do something on your webpage. You have something that tells abutters how to go through the process of participating in the site review process, but there's nothing for developers. I think you could sketch out, you can, I sat there and I went through the site plan review and I went through the zoning regulations. It's not that easy to ferret it all out. I think you need to have a clear, explanation of how the process works, have a timeline, what's expected of the developer, spell it out in easy terms, and that's going to help developer who sees that you're trying to help them through the process. I think it creates a better environment, or makes them see you're more positive about or encouraging of of development and are helping them through the process. I think also creating an online parcel database for the B&M zones so that not only sites that are available, but sites that, there might be something that's not for sale or lease, but it could be developable. And you have a lot of that information already in a database. And if you made it available to developers so that they have the information and they could say, okay, let me look at this parcel. What are the characteristics of this parcel? What could I do here? It again might promote the kind of development that you want.
Have any communities ever done something as simple as put that up, and then when a parcel has been placed under contract, simply put under contract on that parcel?
I've never heard of that.
Well,
But,
I was just curious, because if you're gonna go
you
to that
put all the
extent.
realtors out of business.
Well, I wasn't going that far as to market the realtors, but just to market that there's activity going on and that that it's working, that the other people have already come here.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
No,
You said-
that's fine.
Say it again. 'Cause you said-
Well, you're
just show
suggesting
that-
putting out all the availability of the parcels.
Yeah.
Once you do all the work to put that presentation up, do you leave it, and then when something becomes under contract, simply put the word under contract on the parcel, not change the software or
yeah.
the picture? But just to
Well, I think
advertise
anything
the
you
fact
do to
that
show
you're
something, that
moving-
things are happening.
Yeah, that was
is
the
a,
whole
is a
objective.
plus. The other point I wanted to make is I think, your new web page is great. I would also put, like, you have for business, for visitors, for residents, maybe under for business, something directed at developers, with a good description of the town and what you're trying to do and what kind of development you want. Again, to spur more interest in the area and also to make developers understand what kinds of things you're looking for.
It's hard to do because, what we might think might be good here, the townsfolk might not want to do.
Well, I think
How do you
it's
define
got to
it?
be something, I guess, that there's some, I guess you have to reflect the consensus of what the town is looking for. I guess hopefully hopefully this will help people to come to
Yeah,
some
people
consensus
say things
about it.
like, we want to foster smart growth and good places to live and work and play and that kind of thing that people won't object to, I guess.
Well, I think a second phase of this is the whole visioning with the community input
Right.
of this project. To say, okay, this makes sense to develop the town in these particular areas. What are people really looking for in these areas?
So you're going to get all sorts of opinions on that.
Yeah, we did with the mills.
You're going to get some which
Okay.
I want to just
See,
exactly like it is.
See, I think if we had, with your outline of recommendations.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the last page. If the last page was expanded, and it sort of took the whole conversation we had tonight about whether it's the north end of town, the 152, the sand pit area, all the areas we've been talking about, from the parking lot across the street, which looks like it's already been designated for something, and discussed or brought options that you think and we think are viable for the town. Val asked a question a while ago that really didn't get answered. She said, well, what do other old sand pits do? And we really never answered that question, because I don't know that you know, and I don't know that anybody here really knows. All I could think of is a skateboard park that I saw on Lafayette Road, and I don't know that that's feasible or desirable or economically worthwhile for them or the town. But
Become a lake.
what I think would be helpful here would be to break down the different areas of the town and make some tangible suggestions as to the types of businesses or uses, because all uses are not businesses, that might be beneficial to, further the town's growth in a positive manner. That's what I see. I think it's been touched on a little bit, but not really identified and nailed in a manner that if we do have a visioning session with the town to get feedback from the constituents as to what they think of basically this presentation. I would want to see it tightened up a little bit with a little bit more specificity as far as, you know, recommendations, options, A, B, C, what do you think? And then we could say to people, what do you think of this for that? What do you think? And then we could get the feedback, and then, because I think, unless I'm missing something, we talked about some biotech, as long as it's not gonna, create smallpox for the whole Northeast. We talked about some uses for, potentially for elderly, or some type of housing in areas that have bad access. I don't know that we really came up with anything for the north end of town, toward Durham, which I always thought had potential, but it doesn't seem like anything's gone there. Like from like the bowling alley north, it seems like there's land there that could,
Yeah,
I just don't know enough about, but I'm not seeing enough options here to really give to people and say, what do you think?
And one of the things I think that would be helpful to tie with this type of activity, business or residential, is the recommended, because you had said your zoning, you might want to adjust that. Well, what does the zoning need to look like so that those things that you're talking about can happen? If you're really talking about growth in an area where it has the ability to impact the tax rate in a positive manner, what's the zoning that you need to have with it?
Yeah, they're all
Because-
interconnected.
Because if we don't have them together, I think we're going to be 20 years again.
Well, let's think about how to present it in a way that's helps people sort through what the choices are and helps them make those choices or set priorities.
I never thought of the zoning issues until I read it here, the way you presented it. And I said, gee, we work really hard as a community to develop good business, good residents, and a lower tax rate. But what are the characteristics? What do those zoning regulations look like that are going to allow that to happen?
Yeah.
And that's what I heard
Yeah.
you saying here, is we're just a little bit askewed, and let's draw that closer together.
Yeah, I don't think, and there are people who are experts in zoning. My sense is you don't have to make major changes, but I think some of these zones and some of these issues that I brought up do require some changes, or
So
at
then
least
when-
consideration of those changes.
So when you mentioned
Yeah.
the proper, the recommended business or residential area, and you know of a type of a zoning change, if you could pair those up, then I would at least have a sense of, oh, I get the idea now.
Okay. And then, Gary, are you also saying, like, when we went through each of those different districts, to have a little narrative about what we think would fit best in those districts
Yeah,
for new developments?
I don't think it would be a bad idea to say, okay, I'm just making this up as a hypothetical. This particular zone was zoned in, 1997. The concept was it was going to be a mixed use, and this was the concept behind it. For whatever reason, that didn't materialize. So now we're here. These are some uses that might be viable. These are things that might fit into these particular areas or neighborhoods. This is the zoning that would be considered to make those things happen. So you have an action plan so people can connect the dots.
Yeah.
Because right now, we're sort of saying, well, we'd like, some biotech, we'd like some offices, or offices won't move to 152 because it's not good access or whatever. So, okay, so what might make sense? If nothing really makes sense, should it just be residential with, some twist on it? I don't know, so with whether it's, geez, when they built the housing facility on 152, it was very controversial, and that wasn't even a high-density housing development, as I recall. The Gussie, thing back then, it was crazy. But that went along with the whole town being rezoned to high-density work, housing. But anyway, I think that would,
Is the senior housing?
yeah.
Yeah.
But that was pretty because it was the whole town. It was another
Right.
one of those deals where the densities went kind of crazy, and it was for the entire town. And
For the entire zone.
it wasn't just that zone, it was zoning for the whole town, and it sort of spun off that to, if you recall, 495 units on the Schultz property that didn't really have a plan associated with it. But I don't want to digress into
Yeah.
what happened in the past, as much as just to say that things that haven't come to fruition, I think, you know, from a plan that we may have had in the past, I think maybe it's time to say, okay, this is what could potentially happen here. These are the businesses or the types of, it's not just business, but this is the type of development that might make sense. How do people feel about it? And this is the type of zoning that would be necessary to facilitate that type of development. Because I think without the zoning and the concept, first of all, I think the history is important. Because without the history, people won't really know, you know, why it was changed or why something didn't happen. And so we don't just go like, you know, around the same circle forever. So I think it's important to, you know, to choose some examples of, okay, this is what we wanted to do. We got some of it, we didn't get all of it. Now it's time to look for something different. These are the things we're looking at to move on. And this is the type of zoning that will help us get us there. I mean, that's what I would do if
Yeah.
I was trying to make something happen.
Well, I would say the kinds of actions, because sometimes it's not zoning. Sometimes the zoning is fine and it's just something else that needs to happen. I think,
Yeah, and sometimes it
Yeah.
isn't. You know,
Yeah.
sometimes it's a combination of little parts of
Yes.
everything.
So like a matrix, kind of,
Yeah,
I
I mean,
think
an
that's a
action,
great
for me, it's
yeah.
an action plan so
Yeah.
people can connect the dots.
I would agree.
Because, you know, right now what we're doing is we're saying, geez, we'd like to see, you know, a nicer downtown with some nicer restaurants and maybe some more professional office buildings. And if we could get some, you know, high-tech in, that would be great. And if we could get some biotech that's not too, you know, threatening to everybody's life, that would be great. But it's not, I think it needs to be a little bit more targeted, and I think it needs to be more specific to the areas that make sense to do these things. I mean, I can't imagine anybody in this room that has a business or makes a livelihood that would have a plan for an area. And I can think of multiple areas around the town that started 20-something years ago or 15 years ago. Nothing happened in where the goal, for where the goal was set, and you kept on going. And nothing changed. I don't think most businesses could survive that way. So, you know, to me, if we're gonna do anything productive, and we're gonna propose something to the public, I think that would be a start. To me, without doing that, I don't know what we're doing.
Right.
But that's my opinion. Does anybody else have any opinions?
Well, can I ask a basic question? What are the next steps? Are we preparing to go to the public or public meeting?
Well, I think that before I went to a public meeting, I'd want to sort of address what I just brought up, unless you don't think that's worthwhile. What are we gonna go to the public with?
Right.
I think we develop something like that and go to the public then.
Yeah, so are we, I forgot what we planned, is that the plan?
Well, yeah,
Develop
we
something
have
more
some,
concrete and go to a public meeting? Is that,
yeah, I would like to see a little, I was hoping that this would be just a little bit more, I think this touches on a lot of the things we want to do, and I think it's slightly, I'm being diplomatic, it's too general. I think I'd like to see it a little more targeted, and more targeted to the areas of the town that we're trying to address, and then I think we can go to the public. But that's my opinion. What other
You
people?
take this and you do target it, I agree. You take what the recommendations are here into the next step, what they can mean.
Can you shut that on? Can we
Into
do that
a-
on now, Peter, or?
into a plan.
I
that
was
you
gonna,
take to
I
the
well, I didn't
public.
finish,
Sorry,
but I don't know.
Sorry, excuse me, I apologize.
All right. Yeah, so you take,
Uh-huh.
you know, take all those recommendations and put put them into something like that, where it's like, here's the recommendations, we wanna do this as an action plan, and you take that to the public.
I think.
Exactly what you said.
That would work for me. How do you feel
Well,
about it, Bill?
Absolutely, because what we're hearing here is, okay, there are pockets of town with the existing zoning, where the permitted uses by that zone don't work to develop the tax base in those particular areas. Okay, this is saying, okay, but you've got, you know, if you modify the zoning, whether it's tweaking density or changing it to whole other different types of permitted uses, or changing it into a whole different zone, business to residential, or, you know, whatever it may be for that particular area, then we need to see that, because then you'll have the feedback.
Then the public can
And
say, I
then
don't
they
like
can
it,
have
I
the
do
action
like
items.
it.
Well, I can certainly go into more detail or more specificity about what, you know, what I see as the best opportunities in those different zones, and where you need to rethink the zoning to help the public understand what we're talking about. So it
And what
makes it more
business you think
concrete.
will fit here.
Right.
That's a big part of what you're supposed to be giving us.
Well,
Right.
and I've done that.
But Gary's just saying, take it and pull it together in a
Yeah.
grid.
Yeah.
Box and package it.
But
I'd like to make
it
one
is,
more suggestion.
pardon me?
So you can go ahead first. I was just gonna make another suggestion.
Go ahead, which is?
Then not only do we make this sort of location specific, but you have a lot of good recommendations there. Some of the things we can do right away, some of the things are gonna take more time, and maybe we can make these a little more time specific.
Well, what I wanted to do is, and that's why I called it an outline, is to get the feedback about where this is going, and then take it a next step after that. So, you know, I want to get your feedback as to, like, are we going in the right direction here? And then get more specific. So, and this is helpful in saying, how can we get more specific in a way that will help the town understand what this means, or to make some decisions, or give their, you know, their I'm not gonna say it right, their, you know, approval of what the committee is, you know, that's the strategy or the direction the committee wants to go. So I think this is really useful, because, you know, my intention was to be fairly general at this point, and then get more specific based on your feedback. So, you know, if you sort of like the general direction we're going in, or if there's some things in here you say, no, that doesn't make sense, or I don't like that, or here's something you missed, then we'll try to tweak it, and then take it to that next step. And, you know, with an eye toward, or an eye toward making it digestible to the community.
And I think if I could just add to what I said,
Yeah.
you know, there are certain things that we could get started right away, like the website portion, you know. If you could break this out into things that we could do in the next 6 months,
Right.
or
Like
the next,
immediate,
yeah,
short,
12 months,
short-term,
or
medium-term,
next 2
long, yeah.
years, you
Yeah.
know, that would be
That's a
helpful.
good suggestion, yeah. Okay, everybody, it's getting late, so.
I think Gary jumped to the end
Yeah.
of all that.
So, you know, we talked about this issue of density, and considering doing a density bonus to developers that meet more rigorous design standards. I think the town needs to, you know, consult with experts about how you do those design standards in a way you get the downtown to have the look and the feel and, you know, the character that you want it to have.
Talking about density bonuses, are you specifically talking about residential?
I'm talking about
density?
residential, yeah. Just related to the issue that I raised
So
earlier.
in other words, if it's 6 units per acre, just to use the number, and that's what it is, and we came up with, I don't want to speak for Peter, but if I read this right, and if we had some design standards that were would enhance the look of Newmarket.
Mhm.
Whether it's, developers making improvements for off-site improvements that I've spoken to Steve ad nauseum about, or the building looking a certain way that would fit in. We've all heard about the gas station that they would have done differently if we had asked them to, but we didn't because we don't have any design standards, but we have some, but we don't really implement them, by our ordinance or statute or whatever it's termed. I think that's what Peter's saying. If somebody does something that's, really meets the look and the criteria of the town and is consistent with the look that we're looking for, realizing we don't know what maybe that is at this point, but I think we should
You just-
consider doing it.
You give the developer
Then we
the
give them an
opportunity to
incentive.
invest in that.
Yeah. I think that would, be positive.
Okay. So, just some ideas for business recruitment, and again, raising the profile of the town, providing information, working with people who work with business to find locations, realtors, and, specifically UNH folks that might know of folks who are starting companies and may want to look at Newmarket as a potential location. Then doing this business retention and expansion program with a cooperative extension. And then some of the things that you can do to try to bring more folks from around in the town and around the town, to bring them downtown. Having your business association maybe take the lead in these things, providing information about what's available, but also developing more events, like the Chowder Fest or the Lobster Fest?
Oyster Fest.
Oyster Fest, yeah.
Heritage Festival.
That highlight your downtown and bring people in and show them what's here. And then, of course, using social media, maybe doing a Facebook page, Twittering, the things that everybody does to, get the millennials' attention. But, it's sort of, we all roll our eyes, but it actually seems to work. So that might mean, something's going on downtown today, or, something on the Facebook page about an event or a sale or something, or a profile of a business, interesting business downtown, all to get people to see that there are things here. And as you bring more people in, then that helps to create demand and makes the downtown more appealing for other business to come in as they see, more foot traffic, more sales, and so on.
And I think we do a lot of that fairly well at
Yeah.
the moment.
Yeah.
I mean, like the Heritage Festival brings it in, the Oyster Festival. Sports-wise, we have the Smiley Nose 5K races, and that brings in a ton of people. So you're saying that these are the kind of things where the town would take the lead in it?
I think,
or-
well,
or
with the downtown, you've got your downtown business association, right? That would seem like more appropriate for them to take the lead on
Right,
those
and
things.
We're
Business
endorsing
associations.
businesses, we don't endorse businesses, because some people say, well, you always favor that one and this one.
Who you work with.
Yeah.
With the development, but there is, the business association does run a website and Facebook page called Around Newmarket.
I looked at things, maybe I missed things. I thought that there wasn't a lot of content on what I saw,
It might
and
be
I
better,
thought,
without a doubt.
I thought it could
Is
be,
it linked to the town website?
I think so, I mean, I think there's a connection.
They're
there.
on,
I'll
I know,
have to
because
look
the
at
town has a Facebook page, and I know they're on that.
Yeah.
well, let me look at that more specifically.
I mean, the
But
town just changed its website, so I don't know if everything got,
But I'm not
It's-
saying,
yeah,
I mean,
it's
if you're.
yeah, I'm not saying nothing is being done.
If you're not seeing it, it can be better.
I just got the sense, that you could up your game
Right,
a little
right.
bit here.
just one thing about upping our game.
Yeah.
Since you feel the heart of the town is the catalyst, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
as we go north and south from the center of town, and there does seem to me, and I'm certainly no land use expert at all, but that's why, we called you to some extent. It would be nice to see what makes sense maybe toward the north side, as we go toward Durham, like tangible, you picked out some lots, along the way. Seems like there's potential along that route that really is, I mean, maybe it,
So a lot of it's
I would say-
because once the water and sewer lines get upgraded up there, then you've got a whole different potential ability. Because right now, when you talk to developers,
So that's prohibiting everything?
The cost to develop up there is
Mhm.
cost
If
prohibitive.
water and sewer, there's a lot more interest. It's like, is there water and sewer there? Yes. Great, let's look at it. Is there water and sewer there? No. Hey, yeah, no, we don't want to do that.
And currently, there's not the capacity, maybe Leo, you can jump in on this. The current capacity up on the, from Dame Road north, we just don't have the right size of the water lines, and you've got the pump station problems down on.
But that's gonna be
Yeah.
addressed, right?
Address it. The state's actually holding us up because of the number of cuts we wanted to do, and it's their road, and we're trying to negotiate something out there to get it going faster.
But
And
if-
upgrading
so-
the
but if
sewer
we
pump
hit-
station and all that on the Bay Road pump station,
Amazon.
that's being all
Yeah.
upgraded,
They're looking at it, yes.
yeah.
I guess my question is if we had that, just
Yeah.
if we did, what are, what are the lot sizes? I'm not saying pick, do something for every lot, but
Yeah.
what are the types, where's the development, and what type of growth might we be able to see, along that corridor? I mean, we know what's happened on the south side up to, I guess, McDonald's area and some of the office, and that's kind of developed nicely, up to the point where that you really can't do much more, because once you get past the industrial park, it gets contracted until you get to the golf course, which has obviously got a plan now. But the north side seems to be a little bit
Well, I kind
left
of see,
open.
yeah, I kind of
seems like
see,
a lot of potential's there, and it's, it just seems like we put a lot of emphasis on areas that are very difficult to make something happen with, and what's staring us right in the face. I mean, I have no idea how much it costs to bring water and sewer to the north end of town. Is it, how many millions?
It's not cost prohibitive, we can do that.
So I mean, and I'm not picking on Black Bear at all, but I mean, Black Bear, had over $1 million at one point in it, well in excess of that. We were talking about bonding $3 million to build a crossing or whatever. And you got a north side of town that if we were gonna invest something in, that is right on 108. It just, I don't know, it seems like our priorities sometimes get, I don't know if, it just seems like we take the hard road instead of like what's in front of us, and maybe I'm,
Well, where's the biggest bang?
well,
for the
I think
buck?
as sort of a general observation is that the area that really you're thinking about focusing on is from the town line, the Durham town line, down to maybe New Road, and then out to the high school, and that being sort of maybe think of that as the triangle of development or
And we've gone
focus.
through, we've
Yeah.
gone up to the industrial park. It's not like we haven't gone to the south. I mean, we have.
But
We've looked at a million things
maybe,
for the golf
maybe
course.
the north toward Durham might be a good place to try to get developers to do development that focuses on the needs of technology companies or, UNH spinoffs. I mean, maybe that might be just off the top of my head.
So how do we find out if there's an interest for that?
I think, it's really talking to people. It's really talking to people who know what's happening in the market. Also, I think keeping a relationship with UNH, with the folks in UNH who are working with businesses or trying to start and spin off businesses, and the New Hampshire Innovation Commercialization Center. First of all, so they know you're there. And second of all, so you keep your pulse on what really is going on. I can do get things started. Frankly, there's so many topics here, I can only scratch the surface. So I can't, and things change as time goes on. So, they're saying we're making a big push to really get more business development coming out of UNH. But to understand that, really, it's just relationship building. and communication. I think there's an opportunity, based on what I know, but I think it's up to the town, really, the folks in the town, to really keep up with how these opportunities are evolving, you know, keep their finger on what's happening in the market and try to, you know, leverage that or capitalize on that. I've given my best judgment about what the opportunities are based on what I know, but, you know, the economy, you know, can change. So, I mean, I think it's a good start, but you see what I'm saying? It really has to be an ongoing process. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it does.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, I'm thinking, is that someone in the town that is doing outreach? Is it the businesses that do outreach? It's, I don't know.
I think you can do
My
outreach.
business,
Yeah.
I did my own outreach. I advertised. So I tried to drive my business and, bring people in. In a way, Newmarket, might need to do a little, without getting hokey, what Newmarket is and, a little campaign. I don't know.
Mhm.
Yeah.
We're just talking, but.
Well, I think some of these things, yeah, branding, that I'm talking about, try to get at that, tooting your own horn, letting people know you're there, letting people know that, there's certain kinds of development that you'd really like to see here, that you welcome certain kinds of businesses, that, you have a lot to offer. So absolutely, I mean, I think that's a fairly low-cost activity that can have some payoff, because it's my sense is that you're not on people's radar screens a lot of times.
So maybe that could be something potentially that NCDC could pursue.
I think we're getting pretty active in that area. Just we had a recent meeting dealing with mill space. That's going to be a pretty significant calling card for this town. There's going to be a lot of pretty neat events going on.
You mean the arts center, or?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be a great addition
When
to
is
the
that
downtown.
going online?
Well,
So
they got occupancy now. They're going to have, actually, I think they're going to have a Christmas fair. A lot of artisans in there. Tried to do it last year, like up in the hallways there, it was pretty crowded. This year it's going to be the whole basic thing that's sold out already. And these, now they've got occupancy, they can get people in and have events. And now they can raise money to finish it off, but at least it's a start.
how many feet is it, Shay?
5,400 square feet, something like that.
Okay, and just to wrap up, the last slide, really, I'm thinking about some of the infrastructure you can develop to promote visitors. Yeah, there's very little lodging in this area. This could be a great location for B&Bs. You might work, identify people who, and sometimes this is just taking 2 or 3 or 4 rooms in your house.
It's
and
not permitted use.
Well, okay, we're going to have to make a zoning change, but certainly it's a pretty benign use, and you can make a zoning change, and also you could maybe work with a small business development center to set up a course on starting a B&B. And, if you have 4 or 5 B&Bs in the town, that helps, again, to bring in some visitors, get more visibility, and so on. You're right on the Great Bay. Could you put in some transient moorings at the town dock so that people who are out sailing or motorboating on the Great Bay can, pull up and stop and have a bite to eat or stroll around the downtown? And then walking and biking trails are always good. I know you're expanding your bike trails, and I think continuing along those lines is also a positive thing to do. So I think that's, and then we talked about this, repurposing zones B2 and B3.
On a B3 zone, we know there's 2 pieces of property that have been for sale for quite a while, and something is gonna happen on those that, not recently, but, and I guess you say here, no town water or sewer. There is, did they bring up the point there is town water there?
Up
In fact, the
to,
wells are right on the B3
right,
zone.
and then the sewer ends at the,
Right.
the
Right, so it's not
restricted
that
age.
far to get sewerage up there.
Right.
too, so It's
Pretty
not,
huge.
something's gonna happen there. near
I mean, you
future
could get it
with
there, it's
two
not
large
currently.
pieces of property
Correct, it's not
for
currently
sale.
It's not currently there.
Well, they're for sale, but nobody's bought them yet. So
Well,
that's the
they're on
question. Is
sale a
any,
few
is
months.
is anybody gonna buy them and what are they gonna do with it?
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
ones are
Thing
for
is,
sale?
it's only been on market for a couple of months.
Mhm.
and
But there's
Well,
been
once-
many properties for
there's
sale.
like-
But the Boyer property's been on
large
sale
gravel pit
for
there
a
that's
year.
basically dug out, so
Yeah,
they're getting out of it. And-
yeah.
And I guess, no, there is town water there, in fact,
Town was on.
town wells, both town wells are right, there. one's in.
Are they water lines or are they town wells?
Wells.
Town wells and there's water line going from the town wells to the town.
But,
To tie into the water line.
okay, well, I may be mistaken about that.
B
I'll-
three,
I'll check on that.
The big
It's
one?
still a
Water
very tough
line.
area.
Hmm?
Still a very
well,
tough
the.
I think it's,
water line
either way,
basically
it's still a
ends at
tough
the old
area for
town
business.
garage. The big 8 inch, and there's a 2 inch line that goes from there all the way down to the hill almost to Swamp Road. There is
So it's
town-
in on 152?
on 152, yeah. So there is a main, well, the well is right in back of the town garage, and there's 6 inch coming up there, and there's 8 inch all the way down there.
Okay.
And town sewage is not that far from there, really, to, so.
Hmm. I have to
All
say,
right, well,
correction
good.
on the bed and breakfast, they're allowed in a lot of zones. So,
Yeah, I
yeah,
thought they
everyone
were-
should be opening up their homes in all our zones. To have a B&B.
You got a 63 acre lot that's been for sale for a while, and there's a 21 acre lot that's been for sale recently, so.
Mhm.
it's,
In the B3 zone. In the B3 zone?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay,
Leo, I think it's time for you to buy it and develop it.
Yeah.
okay. Well, unless anybody has any more comments, and certainly I welcome you calling or emailing me with any comments. It sounds like the next step would be to take this a step further and prepare something that would be suitable for presentation to a public meeting.
And I'd like to shoot for January if we could.
Sure.
Yeah.
And this time, like, not have it turn out to be March if we could, you know.
Yeah.
because- No, I'm not being the wise guy, but it needs to be
Yeah.
a little tighter. So if we, I know it's a busy time of year and everything, but if we could shoot for some time, like, second, if we could get something to review by the middle of January, so we could have some, public meeting and have people's input, I think that would be worthwhile to do,
January 16th as the meeting, it's the same week as this one would be.
I mean, I think that would be a good target to shoot for, and a lot of the work is done, now it just needs to be.
Yeah, so what I would do is get you something before Christmas holiday to look at. You can get me your comments, and then we'll have something ready for the 16th, and then we'll just need to think about, I guess, the format and how we're going to run the meeting.
What's your email we can get you at?
I'll give you my card, okay?
Is it worthwhile for us to rank, from 1 to 10 priorities individually?
In other words, the zones or the areas that we think we should really focus on.
Well, I was thinking more of the recommendations rather than the real zones, but, I mean, they're kind of spread out a bunch, the pages and slides, so you'd have to sort of condense it.
I would
Just throwing
say-
it out there, I don't know.
I don't like ranking things,
That's
but
fine, but
Well,
I think,
what's
it's
the
like,
highest
is it a good
opportunity?
is it a good idea or not? If it's not a good idea,
yeah,
and people on the committee feel that way, I would rethink it. But it's more a matter of prioritizing, what's the most important to do.
And timeline.
Yeah,
I mean, if we thought, just for sake of argument, if we thought, a recreational entity was something we wanted to do, just to address what can you do possibly in a sand pit, just to, and that's a long term, I'm just making this
Mhm.
up. If that's not gonna happen, but we can do something and get it addressed within a 6 month to a 1 year period versus that's a much longer
time frame to put that whole thing together, we should probably try to look at prioritizing and going after
Yeah.
the lowest hanging fruit, other than the website stuff and whatnot. But I don't think putting a timeline or a priority or a focus, a focal point, in a prioritization, I don't think that would be bad for us. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I
That we
think
can
that's
sort of attack
a
it
good
on
idea.
that basis.
Yeah,
Peter, I just had one point of clarification.
sure.
I was waiting. I didn't bring it up, thought we were going through everything first, but on page 6, you have high commercial occupancy rate makes additional commercial property development precondition for business growth. What is our current commercial occupancy rate in Newmarket?
Well, this is a very informal survey, which is asking people, are there any, empty, storefronts or offices? And, I know like the mill is pretty much completely rented out. So there isn't vacant space there as far as I understand. And,
There's one vacant space that
okay,
is evolving around. New England Shoe moved out, and they left an office space that's being taken over by a geotech firm, and then there's this retail space which is yet to be redone.
But like Kent Place and the condos over here are commercial. I mean, are they 100% occupied, or the storefronts all downtown?
No, they're not.
One storefront downtown is not occupied now, they just
And
moved
isn't the
out.
dentist office gonna be moving or something?
He's moving out, yeah.
Staying in Newmarket?
Yes, he's going up to
Okay.
Dan White's.
Yeah, so
Oh, yeah.
there's some, instead of guessing,
So Dan has vacancy.
I mean, would it be that hard, Steve, to get someone, to just get an idea of what's open for rent? Or is that easy, could the town provide that information to Peter to just, or
We
could a
don't,
realtor?
we don't get that information.
I could practically give him.
I would say
that
he's the one,
it's
probably,
available.
the realtor's probably the one
You
that's
can-
getting better.
I mean, I think that I
Yeah.
would rather not guess, truthfully.
Yeah, no, I could practically
You
give
got
him
that.
that.
That'd be
almost
great.
everything that's not
Yeah.
available.
Okay.
I did look at,
Which, if you look at percentage-wise, you're right, we have a high percentage of occupancy. We really
Yeah.
do.
Does that take into consideration, Jerry, a building, let's say a building has 4,000 square feet, and someone has a business in there, and they want to rent out 2 more spaces in that building. If you looked at that building, would you say that building is occupied? And let's say the rest of the space was unfinished, but they would finish it if they had someone that wanted to go in and use it. Would that,
I would count that as vacancy, if it's going to be, if it's like, even if it's unfinished, but it can be finished, the whole idea would be to get it occupied fully, if it's usable space.
well,
You
the
know,
reason I bring
It's
it,
just a matter of fitting it out, so like that, if somebody had 4,000 square feet, and there's another 3,000 that they would move into to get it finished, it would be done. I think if there was someone that would already move into it, the owner would just get it done.
and the reason I'm asking is because I know of one, I just don't want to mention names, I don't think it's appropriate in a public meeting like that, but when Peter's looking at the occupancy of the particular building that I'm thinking about, that building probably has the potential for, a couple of more units, so to speak.
Right, if you're looking
So
at
would
it,
Peter look at that and say, well, that's occupied, or would he say it's partially occupied? You know what I'm saying?
Well,
Built out.
if it's unfinished at the moment, it's not available, so you wouldn't be putting it in as as part of the vacant
Okay.
space.
I get
But
it.
if there's somebody that would move into it right away, then the owner would without a doubt finish it and get them
Yeah.
in there, and then it would become a larger amount of,
It's not quite a
available
science.
in occupancy space.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's,
well, can I talk to you later, Jerry, about, about what's available? But I think the larger point is that, you have towns where they have a downtown which, has a 25% occupancy rate, has dozens of vacant spaces. I don't think that's the case in Newmarket. So I think the larger point that you need to expand your commercial inventory to increase your business base, that's the main point. But I'll certainly try to be more precise about, you know, what the situation is at this
Well, I'm
point.
not saying I can tell you every single space.
Right, right.
Um,
There's not a lot. I looked on
only-
web page, you know, real estate web pages, there was very little advertised.
Yeah,
It's
no,
probably
You have to go to
informal.
Sidemore, right, to
Yeah.
get, to really get anything.
Well, everything on Cyber is my listings.
Yeah, talk to Jerry.
So, yeah, it's not.
All right, well,
Okay, so we're gonna shoot for the middle
Yeah.
of January. We'll get something hopefully by New Year's. How's that for a deadline, before New
yeah,
Year's?
that's, I really think I can do it before Christmas.
Good.
Thank you for giving me the
One more
leeway.
Point here,
If Steve has
I wanna go back to, you know, your stat here about that it would take $46 million more commercial property to reduce the tax rate by.
Assessed value, yeah.
Assessed value, yes.
Oops.
It'd be helpful to know what general properties, the assessed value of some of the bigger commercial properties we have in town. I mean, you said Lamprey was 2. Just so we had some perspective as to what it
What
would
that
take to
means,
make up
yeah.
$46 million in assessed value.
And that number is premised on commercial because of the cost, could be the dollar cost with
Right.
20-something cents, as opposed to if you compare it to what's the number of residential assessed valuation
Right.
that needs, you know, to produce $1 reduction in the tax rate. What's the assessed valuation of mixed use? We had shown some of those, you know, examples. In mixed use, I think was going to be the highest, other than high-end residential, to contribute, to lower the tax rate by $1.
Well, that feeds into our discussion about what to do with these other zones. You know, maybe there is a better ratio or better assessed value property.
And because each use has a service cost associated with it. You know, residential potentially could have you know, the school impact cost, as well as the town services cost.
Well,
And some commercial can do the same, as we found out, you know, in Steve's old town. So, I mean, all that's meaning,
What type of commercial?
well, the Epping situation with all the,
Well, that can depend on the deals that are done with them.
Right.
Yeah.
Most of the commercial doesn't have an impact on the town, they pay for their own services, no matter what.
it seems like what happens, though, in a practical way, a developer comes in, they say, this is what I need. The town says, well, I don't know if we can do that. They say, well, we'll go somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, that's.
And that, the reality is, if I may be so bold, is usually the towns, at least in this type of economy and even before, give in more than, say, someone like me would like to see it, but that's just me.
I think
And,
that's
and you pay that price to sort of get the ball rolling, and I think,
kind of what happened with Walmart and Epping. They came in
Well,
and said,
they
we
must be
want
at the
this
end.
and that, and we wanted reduction on this, and they got it.
Their whole,
And then the police department
Reduction.
ended up having to do an awful lot more there. and it
but I
became
think,
a-
I think, you know, it's something, there's that balance, and, you know, just to that point, because I think it's really the other part of this whole discussion that we haven't even touched on, which we're not gonna get into now, but, which is, when you do those things, and we really tried to do that thoroughly with the Boise Cascade deal. You know, first it was, we don't need you to do this, we'll split the infrastructure, it's gonna be a 2-shift, it's gonna be this. Then it turned out, well, we can't pay for any infrastructure, and it's gonna be 3-shift, and pretty soon the town was looking at being upside down and breaking even in 40 years, or whatever the deal was. And what I'm getting at is, particularly in economies like this, you know, there's that balance. I think Newmarket has done some things to drive business. We've worked with Chinburg with a 79E for the mills. It's been beneficial for the town. In the years to come, we'll be getting tax revenues, and it's that analysis, which I think is really the last part of that puzzle, which is where a lot of towns just don't do it. And I think that without having that part of the equation, you know, you do leave yourself exposed to surprise.
Yeah,
you
I
know?
mean, that's what I meant when I said, like, well, it depends on the deal that's done.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if 26 cents is the right number, that's a national number, but the larger point I wanted to make is that if you really want to, if your objective is to lower your tax rate by increasing your commercial property inventory, you're going to have to do a lot of commercial property development to make a difference. And I think that, even if I don't have the numbers exactly right, I think that's a fair statement.
And that's a
Well,
misconception.
To be quite honest, that was part of the Epping issue, was I remember I was there.
Everybody thought it was gonna be a
I
bullet.
was there for the first bill, and they said, well, why didn't our taxes drop? I go, because that doesn't happen when you build something right away. You need to build a lot of something to do that. And
But also.
Well, you also need to
And
wait
they did
for
a
the
bunch of
time
other
for it to
And
come
they
into
had
the tax
a lot of
roll.
residential as
They
well,
did.
which then.
they had a boom of both. They had a boom in school infrastructure items. At the same time, they thought that the commercial was gonna pay for it,
But it wasn't.
and it doesn't do that.
Yeah,
And it-
that's why you really need to do the analysis before you jump in and.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to look at that as another informational thing, see how they're doing with that Newmarket basket plaza
Yeah.
now that's doing so well.
You're right, the new plaza.
How is that
But you really have
impacting?
to look at it, and as Gary's saying, you have to look at it over the time value, because there is a point in time where the commercial development in Epping does come onto the tax roll.
But most of it already is. Most of it just.
That came on
Just-
right away. It was the
Yeah.
costs that they didn't anticipate that drove up their infrastructure,
There
I
was some
think.
water and sewer costs that didn't come on right away.
Right.
But that was it. But every other development was, as far as I wasn't there for it all, but there was no tax.
Yeah, and that's a good point that Bill made, because, you know, when we're doing this whole thing, you know, a lot of times people think bigger. I remember when I was curious about a big building, I think the Boise building was 120,000 square feet. A lot of people go, 120,000 square feet, that's gonna be worth, you know,
Mhm.
tons and tons of money. It's a big tin building.
Right.
Right.
You know, we're talking, I don't even know if it hit I don't even think it was $100 a square foot value. So if you do the math on that, you know, you're talking about a substantial investment by the town to get a tax rate on a building that might have, I think we were looking at 90,000 a year in taxes. Just ballpark. So I mean,
That makes
it's
sense.
just, you know, it's a good point Bill made, because that's part of hopefully what we're gonna be doing and the town's gonna do in the future. And I think we did a pretty good job on the TIF committee. We really did look at the pros and the cons and what the dollars were gonna be. And I think the town bent over backwards, frankly, to try to make that deal somewhat palatable. It was just not. And they ended up moving to the truck stop where the power plant was, you know, in Route 1, in Portsmouth, or right near Route 1 in Portsmouth, Ocean Road. So, anyway. So we got a plan. Are we, everybody pretty much good questions? Peter, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, sorry to keep you so late,
No,
I
it
think
was
it was
good.
a good discussion.
And do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And we are adjourned. Thank you very much.